If you're easily scared, don't watch this at night. Personal spooky story time, and we're gonna call this one That Wasn't My Brother. When I was about 18 years old, I had gone out, and I had a very strict dad growing up. If you're Mexican or Hispanic, you know, my curfew was at midnight. Thankfully, my sister would cover for me, and she would hide pajamas in the restroom. That way, if I got home late, I would go straight to the restroom, I would change, and if he caught me coming home late, I was already in my pajamas, and I'd be like, what do you mean I was in the restroom? So this specific night, I get home past my curfew, I go straight to the restroom, I use the restroom, wash my face, brush my teeth, put on my pajamas. The way that our house is set up is a long hallway, restroom, my bedroom, my brother's bedroom. But as you're walking to the bedrooms, the living room is right here. So as I'm walking to my bedroom, the house is dark as hell. Our front door has glass and the porch light kind of gleams in. So I'm walking to my bedroom and I happen to look in the living room, right in front of our front door, I see a little boy. And he's standing there. But what's crazy is the way that he's standing in this perfect spot, the light cuts off right here. So I can see from here down, but I can't see his face. His face is literally black. Like I can't see any features. I can't see nothing. I'm not exactly sure what he's wearing, but it looks like overalls or something like that. My first instinct isn't, oh my God, that's a ghost. My instinct is, what the hell is my brother doing awake right now? So I stand there and I'm calling for my brother. I'm literally like, Eric. My brother's name is Eric. So I'm whispering and I'm like, Eric. Trying to make sure that my parents don't hear me because it's about 3 a.m. and my brother is just standing there. And I'm like, God. Eric. Nothing. No movement. Nothing. So I'm literally standing there for what feels like forever, waiting for my brother to cut his shit out and fucking go lay down because I'm about to get my ass kicked. And he's just standing there. So now my wheels are turning and I'm like, okay, what's going on? And when I tell you this is the most I've ever been scared, like I was shook, I was shitting myself. I decide, okay, I'm gonna go to my brother's room. Turn on my flashlight. I'm looking and my brother is asleep in his room. I was so scared. I didn't even go back to my room. Like I was freaking out. I've talked about my mom's house being haunted before. What's crazy is that it's inexplainable because my dad built their house. I'd understand if it was like an older house or something like that, but it was a new house. Like I have not done any research on the land, if there used to be something there, if something happened there. I have not done any research, but I have seen and heard so many things inside that house. It is fucking haunted. It wasn't a mimic because now that I think about it, this little boy was definitely younger than my brother, and we've seen him many times. He loves to play peekaboo. We have 2 living rooms in my parents' house, and my mom was always in the smaller living room in her recliner, and a wall separates both living rooms with a half moon, and she says that she'd be there in the morning and this is the wall and she could see the little boy like peeking. And when my mom would go and look, he'd kind of like, or if this is the wall, he'd kind of like, you know, but at least it's a friendly ghost. If you guys have any spooky stories that you'd like to share with me, please send them via DM or email and I'd love to read them. And I will see you guys in the next spooky story. Bye.
This is a 100% true story that happened to a woman in Madison, Wisconsin. Now, there was this woman named Sherry who moved into this house with her 2 children in Madison, Wisconsin. Now, she said, at the time she didn't believe in anything supernatural. She really thought that was a bunch of nonsense. But she said, right away when they moved in, she would notice, out of the corner of her eye, sometimes shadows moving across the walls. She would hear strange noises that she couldn't explain. But she said for the most part, it was just a normal house. One night, she's upstairs in her bedroom and she's folding laundry. She hears talking coming from her son's room. So she makes her way over to his room. The door's closed, and she hears her son having a full-on conversation with someone. And she's like, "Who is he talking to, at 12:30 at night?" So she opens the door, and when she looks in his room, he is not in his bed. So she starts yelling for him. She looks down and sees him next to the side of his bed, on his knees, crouched down, with his head under the bed, talking to someone. And she's like, "Hey, who are you talking to? Like, who's under there?" And her son's like, I can't tell you. And she said, "What do you mean you can't tell me? Like, who's under the bed?" And he's like, "I can't say. He'll get mad." And she's like, "What? Who's under there?" So she runs over to the bed and she looks underneath there. It's empty. There's nothing under there. So she's like, "You know what? Just get back in bed. Like, just stop, doing whatever you're doing." Several weeks pass, and like on a regular basis, she keeps finding her son talking to someone under the bed, except there's no one there. So after a few weeks of this happening, she thinks maybe something is wrong with her son. So she takes him to this child therapist. The therapist like assesses him and says, he seems completely fine. It's probably just his imagination. So several months pass and he keeps on doing this. Well, one day she's sitting down in the living room with him and they're talking when she notices he has some scratches and bruises like all over his body. And she's like, "Where did you get those scratches and bruises from? Like, what's going on?" And he's like, "I can't say. I can't tell you." And she's like, "Yes, you have to tell me, like, what is going on with you?" And finally he breaks down and he starts crying and stuff. And he just starts freaking out. And then he runs up to his room. So the mom, at this time is like, I don't know what to do. Like, what is going on with my son? Like, she's just panicking. Later that night, she's awoken to her son screaming in his bedroom. She runs as fast as she can. She goes in his room. She finds him halfway underneath the bed. He's grabbing onto the bed frame, and it looks like something is pulling him under the bed. So she immediately grabs him, pulls him out from under the bed. She looks under there. There's no one there. So she's like, "You know what? This is weird. Like, you're sleeping with me tonight. You're going to be in bed with me tonight." So they go back to her bedroom. He lays down. He falls asleep. She's sitting in bed. She can't sleep. She's like freaked out about this whole situation. When all of a sudden she hears, "Shh, hey, come under the bed." And she's like, "What?" She looks over. Her son is sleeping. But then once again she hears, "Hey, come here under the bed. I need to talk to you." And it's like a man's voice. And she's like, No, who are you? Like, go away." And the man's like, "Come on, get under the bed. I need to tell you something." And like, she's like, "No, I'm not going under the bed." And she said this man, whoever he was, just started yelling obscenities and getting really angry. So she grabs her son. They get out of the house. And she said she left that night and never went back. And still to this day, that house sits there. And she said she's talked to the neighbors, and they said since she's moved, like several families have lived there and they move out.
I lied. Because this story that I'm about to tell you is the scariest story I've ever heard. If you're new here, hi. I just talk about some pretty scary stuff, and recently I opened an email where anyone who finds this page would be able to submit their ghost stories. And let me tell you, not only have I been getting an abundance of stories that I have loved reading that are from every corner of the earth, these are actually scary. And what I mean by actually scary is exactly that. They actually freak me out. On my last video, I said this was the scariest story that I've ever heard. This one. So I just heard scratching, and as you can see, it's still day out, and that's the only time I really film these videos is during the day because I'm a scaredy cat. So I don't know what that's about, because I thought it was my boyfriend pranking me. So I looked outside and there's no one there. Only when I did the intro for this person. So I'm going to redo it, and if it happens again, I hope it's on video. So anyways, This story comes from Dakota, who opens the email like this. This is the story about a who disguised itself as a little girl and haunted me for 2 years. Dakota then gives us some background context and says that she's a medium. She has seen, felt, heard, and touched spirits since she was around 5 years old, which in retrospect is really scary when you think about it. But she says it all started when she was staying at her mom's house 2 hours away. She had a friend who lived right in front of the woods, and they decided to play hide and go seek. So Dakota finds a great hiding spot in between a shed and a chain link fence. And she says she was hiding, looks over to her right, and on the other side of the fence is a little girl staring at her. And as soon as her and this little girl made eye contact, the little girl reached through the chain link fence and grabbed her wrist. Dakota yanks her hand back and looks back at this little girl, and she is not there anymore. It is also to be noted that this was around fall time, so there were leaves on the ground and branches and twigs and etc. And she didn't hear anyone walk away or run. So Dakota runs out, tries to tell her friend what had happened, and her friend is just not having it because she's scared. Fast forward 2 months, and she's back at her dad's house and having a sleepover with an old friend. As Dakota and her friend are talking to each other on her bed, she looks over at the doorway, and the little girl is standing right in the doorway. She didn't really think anything about it because at the time, all the neighbor kids were allowed to just kind of walk in her house. And I know families like that, so I understand. But she did a double take, and the little girl was gone the next time she looked. She asked her friend, "Did you see someone?" And her friend said, "No, I didn't see anyone." And Dakota said, "Little did I know this was the beginning of a 2-year ordeal." Dakota says every day since then, she sees this little girl in her house. And this little girl did not talk. She just stared at Dakota a lot of the time. And sometimes she would only show half of her face from around the corner. And I'm going to quote this. But her favorite thing to do was watch me sleep. Dakota includes in her email that she likes sleeping in complete darkness. And the only thing that is radiating light in her room is her alarm clock that is blue. And she says every single night she would wake up and see this little girl standing in the doorway, watching her sleep. Dakota says that the most active this little girl was when she was home alone, cleaning her room. And Dakota, while cleaning her room, looks over into the living room. And just for some context, she lives in a trailer, so it's completely open concept, so you can look through rooms. She looks into the living room and sees a little girl standing there watching her. As soon as they make eye contact, the little girl runs into the kitchen. So Dakota follows her. And once she goes into the kitchen, the little girl standing in front of the fridge. The moment they make eye contact, the little girl runs into her dad's room. So she goes into her dad's room. Nobody's there. She's looking around. Nothing. Hears a loud bang coming from the laundry room. Goes into the laundry room. Sees the little girl standing in front of the washer and dryer. Then she runs back into the kitchen, and Dakota didn't see her the rest of the day. And Dakota says that it was really common for this little girl to not speak ever, but she would want Dakota's attention, so she would run around and kick things and knock things off counters and slam cabinets, etc. But fast forward 2 years, and Dakota's obviously used to it by now, but she hasn't seen this little girl in 4 months. Until one day, she saw her in her dream, and it was Dakota's first lucid dream. Dakota says that she goes to sleep, wakes up, and everything in her dream feels so real. She turns over at the clock, and it reads 3:16. When Dakota turns her head back around, there the little girl is. And she looks normal little girl that she's seen for the past 2 years at this point. And all of a sudden, this little girl starts to look really mangled and disgusting. She starts developing this smile and these teeth and sprints at Dakota, where Dakota falls back in her bed and wakes up. Looks over at the clock, 3:16. Dakota gets up, goes to the bathroom, and as she's standing up from using the bathroom, the little girl standing in the doorway. She looked like the same little girl that she's seen the past 2 years. until again she looked really mangled and disgusting and sprints at Dakota, where Dakota falls backwards screaming, and they had this animal cage in their bathtub at the time that they were cleaning, falls back on that, and she could feel the cage under her. But nonetheless, she wakes up again. And it is again 3:16 a.m. But at this point, Dakota is too scared to move and too scared to do anything, so she just sits there until the sun comes up, where she feels safe. Dakota then, that morning, started to feel this burning sensation on her back, goes and looks in the mirror, and there's a huge gash on her back from where she fell onto something. Her then best friend comes over later that day and also has spiritual connections, and tells her about this dream that she had where she was watching in third person and verbatim describes the dream that Dakota had twice. And at this point in time, Dakota did not tell her what was going on. Dakota then ends her email by telling us that if you see a clock or a phone in your dream, it means you're not really dreaming. And as corny as it sounds, she really and truly believes that this little girl was disguised as trying to get her when she was in her most vulnerable state, sleeping. But that experience was 5 years ago, and she hasn't seen that little girl since. And this is all I'm going to say. I don't know how people deal with that stuff for years. I dealt with it for a month, and no. That story was really long. However, I think it was the best story I've read so far. Anyways, that's going to do it for me. Stay tuned for my ghost stories.
Tell me a scary story. I'll go first. For starters, I live in the Appalachian Mountains, so our dogs used to run off all the time. One day, me and my younger cousin got off of the bus and we noticed that the dogs were nowhere to be found. We lived surrounded completely by forest. Them not being there wasn't unusual, so we decided just to go off and look for them in the woods, which is something we did pretty often, so we weren't scared. Me and my cousin started walking through the woods, calling for the dogs, and I had the stupid idea to start whistling. We heard what sounded like our dog barking coming from deeper in the woods, so we started walking towards the sound. But the deeper we were walking in the woods towards the sound, started getting this really bad feeling in my gut that we needed to turn around. I told my cousin how I was feeling, and he told me that he was sure that that was our dogs barking. We decided to keep walking, and then we heard a whistle coming from the direction that the dog's barking was coming from. When I was whistling, I wasn't doing like a normal whistle, I was doing this weird whistle, and this sounded just like the weird whistle I had just done. Almost like whatever it was copying me. We stopped walking and we heard more barking, and I just knew that it wasn't our dogs barking. Like, it did sound similar, but it just wasn't the same. That's when my little cousin looked at me scared like he was about to say something, and I told him just ignore it. I grabbed his hand and we started to calmly walk back home. I didn't say anything, but the entire time we were walking, it sounded like something was walking back behind us. We kept making the walk back home. It took us another like 15 minutes to make it. When we finally did make it back home, we were trying to convince ourselves that it had actually just been our dogs. About 5 minutes later, our older cousin showed up and we told her what had happened, and she said that we still needed to go find the dogs. So she grabbed her dog who can track their scents, and we headed back into the woods. We started calling their names like we had done before, and I started to whistle. My older cousin stopped me and pointed at her dog, who was sitting on the ground growling, looking up at the top of the trees. I grabbed my younger cousin and said we should leave. My older cousin told us no, the dogs could be hurt, so we needed to keep looking for them. After a little convincing, we started walking deeper, but not in the direction that the dog was growling at, just like in the opposite direction. We were walking maybe for 5 or 6 more minutes when we heard what sounded like my mom calling for us, saying she had found the dogs. My mom was in Texas at the time, and she wouldn't be home for 2 more days. We decided to leave. We went the long way, so we weren't walking towards like where the voice came from. When we got home, my younger cousin was crying, asking what if the dogs were hurt, because we just still hadn't found the dogs. Right about that time, our neighbor came walking up the driveway with our dogs. He said they'd been in his house the entire time. He had found them and brought them into his house because the game warden was there. He didn't want them to be taken, so he waited until the game warden left, and then he brought them home to us. The next day, my uncle was asking us about it. When we told him what happened, he looked so scared and said that the game warden was there because one of the neighbors had called in and reported seeing a weird, demented, sick-looking, huge black dog in the forest by our house. They also reported hearing the creepy whistling and barks. The story was actually DM'd to me by a follower. In honor of spooky season, I'm going to be reading a lot more of the stories that y'all send to me on here, so be sure to send them to my DM.
Never let a man come over to your house after a first date. And if you used to do that, you're not going to do that after the story time. Let's go. I also forget to mention that it's a true story time. Yeah, let us begin. The story starts off with this young girl. She goes on a first date with this guy. They go out to get dinner. And honestly, he was a green flag all throughout. Like, he was nice to the waitresses. He paid for the bill. Like, no red flags at all. This is why no matter how normal or nice a guy seems to be, you can never trust them too quickly because the story's like this. The dinner goes great, he pays the bill, and then they just go about their day and they go to their own homes. So obviously this is a respectful man, right? Like, he didn't even try to like get her to come over and didn't ask to go over to her house yet. So she goes home and then she gets a call from him, and he's basically saying how he can't find his key, his roommate is not answering the phone, and if he could just come over for the time being until either his roommate answers the phone or he finds his key somehow. And she obviously said yes because, once again, no red flags. He comes over, they're having a blast, they're just sitting on the couch, talking, vibing, and then it just gets really late, so she's like, hey, you can sleep on the couch until you figure things out, I'm gonna go to my room. And something told her to lock the door. Obviously, she lives alone, she doesn't normally lock the door, but something, an instinct. A woman's instinct is always right. So she ends up locking the door and then just going to sleep. A couple hours pass, and then she gets a knock on her bedroom door, and it's him asking for a phone charger because his died. Something told her, once again, don't open the door, just tell him where it is. So she does not move, and she says, it's on the kitchen counter, like, help yourself. And he says thank you, and then he goes about his business, and then she just goes back to bed. Okay, this is where it gets a little for me. A couple minutes go by, and then he comes back and knocks on the door and says, hey, like, this charger's not working, like, do you have a charger in your room that I can borrow? Something just like raises a flag in her head, like, hey, something's wrong, why does he want to get into my room so bad? So she calls the police. After she calls the police, she hears like the door kind of opening, she hears like a bunch of commotion outside, and then a couple minutes later, the police knock on her bedroom door and say, hey, like, you're safe, he's in custody, come outside and look at your living room. Guess what she saw? Please, just pause the video. I want you guys to guess first before you actually hear what it is. So she walks out from her bedroom to her living room with the police, and she sees her whole living room fully plastered, and she just sees a box of power tools. So drills, axes, you name it, it was in that power tool box. If she left her room and she didn't use her womanly instincts, you guys, women, we're never wrong. I said what I said and I meant it. If she did not just listen to her instincts, she would have been gone. I'm so scared for women. Like, we're not safe ever, and it's really sad. I really want to know how she felt in that moment. Like, just to be like, whoa, like, I just listened to my gut, and that's the main reason I'm still alive till this day. Like, if you're watching this, I'm so proud of you, and I hope you know that. Moral of the story is, a man can be so normal, have the perfect job, and just be a walking green flag and still not be the person that you think he is. So just don't let anyone into your home. Make sure that you guys run a background check first. Okay, I love you guys. Bye.
My experiences in hotels, and this is coming from Alexander DeVille here on TikTok. By the way, thank you so much for letting me share this with everybody. This is the time to sit back, relax, maybe go grab a snack, because this is a long story, but it is so good. Hey Letty, I wanted to share some of my experiences since Halloween is around the corner. I've had some unusual experiences whenever I stay in hotels while traveling. Strange things always seem to happen, and I'm usually the only one who wakes up and hears things while everyone else is fast asleep. I encountered ghosts and communicated with some of them growing up. However, throughout the years, I started to suppress my spiritual side. As I got older, I've reconnected with my spirituality and intuition, but still keep my distance from spirits. I often joke with my friends that I'm probably the only one who gets woken up by strange noises in hotels because I am more open to the spiritual side than they are. I think it's because I'm in a familiar and controlled environment at home, but it's not my space in a hotel, so I am more vulnerable to these occurrences. My friends and I traveled to Denver, Colorado for a concert. It was 3 of my friends, and one of them brought their younger brother, whom we all call Steve for his privacy, who is a few years younger than us. All 4 of us slept in the bedroom while Steve stayed in the living room on the couch. I remember hearing banging on the door in the middle of the night. I assumed it was Steve, who needed to use the restroom, which was in the bedroom. Despite the loud noise, none of my friends in the room seemed to have woken up. Feeling tired, I assumed Steve would figure out that he just needed to slide the door open, so I didn't bother getting up to open the door and fell back to sleep. The next day, I asked Steve why he had been banging on the door if all he had to do was slide it open. again. He looked confused and denied ever waking up during the night. Everyone was a little unnerved, so I changed the subject to prevent them from getting scared. Later that day, they received the news that their uncle had passed away the night before. We couldn't help but wonder if it was their uncle who had been banging on the door the previous night. This other time, we went out of town and had to stay in a hotel. But before I continue my story, I want to mention that I have been a devotee of La Santa Muerte for 2 years here on Dia de los Muertos. Steve asked me about La Santa Muerte and said he had heard she was bad. I explained that the Santa Muerte is not inherently bad. It depends on the intention of the person seeking her help. Some people may misuse her power for negative purposes, while others use it for good. In general, she cares for and protects her devotees. She is not for everyone, but she deserves respect because we will all see her when the day comes. I also mentioned that I always light a candle and pray to her for our safety when traveling. After our conversation, we called it a night and went to bed. It was the next day we checked out of the hotel and started driving back home. On our way, Steve told us that he had seen a dark shadow sitting next to my feet on my side of the bed. He mentioned that he blinked several times to make sure he was seeing right. And indeed, he saw a figure sitting right next to me while I was sleeping. He said he couldn't see its face because it was facing away from where he was, but he got scared and covered his face with the blanket. Despite him feeling frightened, he told himself, "No, Steve, you have to see what it is." So he got the courage to uncover his face, but there was nothing there anymore, and then later went back to sleep. While he was finishing his story, I looked at him through the rearview mirror and asked, "Was she wearing a cloak?" He said yes. I smiled and said, "Who you saw was La Santa Muerte." He looked at me with shock and fear, but I told him not to be scared. She was just watching over me while I slept. This is why she was beside me, next to my feet, like a mother watching over her sleeping child. Mi santita siempre me cuida. Knowing that she was watching over me while I slept warms my heart. The next time we went out of town, Steve didn't want to go anymore. He said it wasn't because of what he had seen, but I low-key think that's why. But then again, I don't blame him. It would be expected for anyone to be afraid, especially because we're all taught to fear death. In our next trip, there was only 4 of us and Steve didn't want to go. Let's call them Jenny, Eva, and Sam for their privacy. That day, we went to a mystical store where they sell crystals and images. In this store, there was a section of statues of duendes. I automatically did not make eye contact with them and did not make any negative comments on how they looked because I knew you should never disrespect a duende and their appearance. As I walked around the store, something kept calling me back to where they were, and I was tempted to buy one and have it for my protection in my home. But in the end, I decided not to buy it because it is a lot of responsibility to have one in your home, and they are known for being pranksters and getting jealous of pets, and I would not do that to my poodle, so I left it as is. Jenny, Sam, and Eva brought protection necklaces. After leaving the shop, we went to a different store. As we walked, Jenny's purse was unclipped from the straps and fell off her shoulder. Her protection necklace fell out of her purse. I jokingly told her that the evil spirits didn't want her to have that necklace. We all laughed and her purse kept falling off. I would understand if the clips to the straps were loose or broken, but the clips were perfectly fine. We went to Chick-fil-A and I was standing behind her in line when it happened again. She was about to reach into her purse to get her wallet. I saw it unclip this time before Jenny reached over to her purse. Even the clerk saw it and looked at Jenny weirdly, so Jenny finally got tired of it falling and decided to carry it instead. After we finished eating, we went back to the hotel. I brought up the topic of duendes and told them that I hope none of them had said anything negative about the duendes at the store. Jenny looked nervous and said yes. I thought to myself that they were weird, ugly looking. I told her, "No, Jenny, you should never make negative comments about them or they might get upset with you." Nothing happened after that. I wonder if the duendes were unclipping her purse. It was night and we were getting ready to go to bed. There were 2 queen beds. Jenny and Eva slept in one while Sam and I slept in the other. Eva was teasing Jenny, telling her she better not snore because last time she couldn't get sleep because of her. Not to throw shade at Jenny, but she does snore pretty loud. I told her we could have a snoring competition and see who snores the loudest, and we laughed about it and went to sleep. It was around 6 a.m. and the sun had not yet risen. I could hear faint talking, although it wasn't loud, but in a lower tone. I thought to myself, why are Jenny and Eva having a whole conversation this early in the morning? I was so tired because we had gone to sleep late that night. I tried to ignore them. I ignored what they were saying, but I realized there was snoring and only one person talking. Then I started to sound repetitive, and I thought, wait, that kind of sounds like a spell or a ritual or something. Who the fuck is casting a spell right now and on who? So I kept my eyes closed and focused on what was being said. That's when I realized the small voice was saying, "Accept your eyes," in a rhythm with Jenny snoring. So I figured Ava was probably talking in her sleep. Jenny kept snoring and the little voice kept saying, "Accept your eyes." I really had to go pee, so I got up to go to the restroom and also to see who was talking. When I got in front of the bed, I realized Eva was not moving her mouth. I looked to see if there was anything in between that could be making that noise, but there was nothing. That's when I realized it was coming out of Jenny, even though she was snoring loudly. Oh, I got chills. Wait. I told myself it was way too early for the paranormal shit, and I really needed to pee. So I went to the restroom and did my business while listening to the voice, and the voice stopped as soon as I flushed the toilet. Then I came out and everything was the same, except there was no longer a small female voice saying, "Accept your eyes." I decided to go back to sleep and tell them about it in the morning. In the morning, I told them what I had heard, and Jenny was in denial. I told her, "Jenny, I wouldn't make this up," but I think she was scared to accept that the voice was coming out of her. She even said that sometimes people mumble when they snore, but I told her, "No, Jenny, this was a completely clear voice saying, 'Accept your eyes.' While you snore, there is no way you can do both at the same time." Then I remembered that I have an app that records my sleeping patterns and sometimes records noises while I sleep. The recording is not as clear as it was in person, but in person it was crystal clear on what was being said. I will see if I can somehow submit the audio to you. I am not good with editing audio, but I tried to reduce Jenny's snoring so that you can hear the small voice saying, "Accept your eyes." I did ask Jenny for her permission to submit the audio, and I do have the audio. We will continue to travel together and occasionally see or hear things, but I just keep it to myself, and if they hear something, I try to make an excuse up so they don't get frightened. My friends believe the message was intended for me, encouraging me to embrace my third eye as I no longer communicate with the spirit realm, as I did when I was younger. Out of the four of us, I was the only one who heard the voice. I think the message was more for Jenny to accept what she sees when encountering a duende and to never disrespect a duende. But who do you think the message was for? Personally, I feel like the message was for him because he heard it. If he hadn't told anybody, they wouldn't have even known. But then again, I can see the other side too. So what do you guys think? The audio is 5 minutes long. I don't know if I'm gonna cut it down shorter when I'm editing or not, but without further ado, here is the audio for you. Am I rhyming? Oh my god, I'm a rapper. You're not a rapper, dumb bitch. Here's the audio. So, after hearing the audio, what do you think? Did you hear it? Who do you think that message was for? Please leave.
Have you ever heard somebody say that everybody will meet a serial killer at least one time in their life? I don't know if that's true or not, but here's my story about how I think I actually did meet a serial killer. Forewarning, this is a little creepy and it's a bit of a long story. So back in 2019 to 2022, I did real estate photography, mainly in Cincinnati, but kind of all over Ohio. One day I got a call about a job where the realtor told me that the daughter of the homeowner who had passed was going to let me into this house because she had the keys. No big deal, very normal. So I show up to the house on my motorcycle because that's how I roll. But when I show up, it's not a woman waiting for me, it's a guy. He's a little bit short, kind of pudgy, balding on top. I said, "Hey, are you the person that's supposed to let me into the house?" And he says, "Yes." I said, "Are you the husband of the woman that was supposed to let me in?" He says, "No, I'm a friend of the daughter whose mom lived in this house," which is very weird, but whatever, he had the keys. So we go inside and this guy's giving me weird vibes immediately, but I chalk it up to maybe he's got a touch of the tism. I'm not going to judge him. Here's where the red flags start though. When I started shooting, he kept walking closer and closer and closer to me, following me into every single room in the house. I repeatedly had to tell him to give me space so he wouldn't be in reflections and so he wouldn't bother me, but he wouldn't listen and kept getting closer and closer and closer. Now, I could have just packed up my stuff and left, or I could have finished shooting really quick so I could get paid, and I chose to finish shooting. So I rushed through all the photos and I tell him, "Hey, I'm done inside, I'm gonna shoot outside the house, and then after that, I'll be out of your hair." But then he says, "You forgot about the basement here." I said, "I didn't know that there was a basement. Is it finished? Because we don't usually take photos unless it's a finished basement." And he says, "No, but I would like you to take photos of it anyways because my friend of the friend told me that she wants photos of the basement." I thought that was kind of weird, but whatever. I don't want to argue with this guy. I just want to get this stuff done. So I'll go down, take 30 seconds to take one photo of the basement, and then I will leave. He shows me where the basement is, and I start to walk down the stairs, and I hear him following directly behind me, like one step behind my foot. So I stop midway down and I turn around and say, "Can you not follow me down here? Because I'm going to take one photo of the whole basement and I don't want you in the background." And he says, I would like to come in the basement as well. We don't move for a second. I'm staring at him, he's staring at me. We're both standing in the middle of this staircase and he has his hand behind his back. So I tell him, I'm not going to take photos of this basement. Please move out of the way. He moves, but he doesn't get out of the basement. He just slowly pushes himself up against the wall, so I have to walk right next to him to leave. So at this point, I figure this guy's either trying to rob me, kill me, or be romantic with me, and I don't want any three of those things to happen. So I push past him kind of quickly so he doesn't have time to react, and I grab my gear and I immediately walk outside. And he follows me and says, I would really like you to take a picture of the basement, please. And I said, no, I am not going to do that. And he gets really angry. He starts to shake a little bit. His fists are balled up. His brow is sweating slightly. His lips are pursed. But I don't care because I don't want to deal with this guy anymore. So I take a couple photos of the front of the house and I start packing up my gear to leave. He goes back inside. So I decide, whatever, I'm not going to talk to this guy anymore. It's not a big deal. As I'm packing up my stuff, I realize that I'm missing my lens cap. And no, I don't mean a lens cap like this. I mean one that's really big and looks like a thermos. It looks like this right here. It is not a small lens cap at all. It's about the size of a cup. I realize I left it inside the house somewhere, so I have to go back and talk to this guy. So I walk up to the house and I knock on the door and he answers immediately like he was waiting for me. But his demeanor is completely different. He's no longer angry. He's not frustrated. In fact, he's even nicer than he was when I first showed up. So I tell him, hey, I left my lens cap in here. Can I come in and just walk through really quick to see if I left it on a counter? And he goes, no problem. I know I'm going to find this immediately because it's a pretty big lens cap and this is an empty house with a couple tables, so it's not like it's lost in clutter or anything like that. But I don't find it. I looked in every single room, on top of tables, underneath tables, next to them. There was no lens cap in this house. Now, he stayed in the living room by the front door. He didn't follow me into any of these rooms. So I walk back to the living room and I say, hey, did you see this lens cap? It looks like this. I can't find it anywhere. He looks at me and he says, I think you might have left it in the basement. Nope, I didn't, because I didn't go down in the basement. I walked halfway down and I turned around and came right back up. I looked at him and I said, nope, I definitely didn't leave it in the basement. And he says, I think you left it in the basement. I didn't say a word to him. I turned around like I was still looking, walked out the back door, got on my motorcycle, and left. Here's the craziest thing about the entire situation. I get done shooting this place, I'm editing the photos, and I get a call from the realtor. They're like, hey, why didn't you shoot this house? This lady's waiting on you. Why didn't you show up? I said, what are you talking about? I'm looking at the photos that I just took right now. How is that possible? She said nobody showed up. She's been waiting on you. Well, she didn't let me in. It was the guy. It was her friend of the friend or whatever. Friend of a friend? What are you talking about? No one knew who this guy was. The homeowner's daughter was really confused. She's like, I didn't tell anybody to let you in. I didn't have a friend of a friend hold a key for you. What is going on right now? And they never found out who it was. To this day, no idea who let me in the house. By the way, there was a dismembered body found in Cincinnati in 2023, and a bunch of people speculated it was a serial killer, but Cincinnati keeps saying that's not the case.
I have a scary story time for you. This time last year, these two girls, best friends, one of their dads sells their camper van, and somebody is going to have to drive the camper van from one side of the UK to the other side of the UK. And the girls, even though they're 19, they volunteer as tribute. They think it sounds really fun and they're going to do a bit of sightseeing. So off they go. They're going to drive there and then they're going to fly home. As soon as they set off, like nothing is smooth sailing. It's like this car is literally cursed. They get a flat tyre, they get lost, they hit loads of traffic. So they end up nowhere near where they need to be. And they are both absolutely exhausted. And by this point, it is like early hours of the morning. And so they both decide, why don't we just pull over, have a nap, tomorrow's a new day. If anyone has a problem with us parking here, they can just come and knock, move, you're in the way, or somebody's not happy with them parking there. So they pull over into this road, and by this point they have been driving for hours, and so one of them needs to use the toilet, and they find a little area where they can do their business, and both of them immediately feel like they're being watched, but it's a well-lit area, and so they brush it off. They get back into the caravan and they turn the lights off, and they're trying not to freak each other out, but both of them feel like they can see the shadows of somebody walking around the outside of the camper van, but they're too scared to pull the curtains back. Eventually that stops and they just think maybe it was teenagers, and so they finally fall asleep. But they wake up to the sound of somebody trying to get in to their camper van. This person is wiggling the lock, so they rush to the front and they pull the curtain back, and there is a man standing there smiling in at them. So both of the girls are kind of miming to this man like, is everything okay? And this guy, he doesn't even reply to them. He's just smiling at them, wiggling the door handle. They're trying to tell themselves that it's probably just like a disgruntled resident and they don't want this camper van parked outside their house. Look at their phones and they have no signal. So they start to scream at the man to leave them alone, but he doesn't. He just takes a step back from the camper van, so he's like a meter away. He just stands there staring and smiling. And they're so freaked out, they try and start the van, but it won't start, and they can't make any calls to any family because they've got no signal. So eventually they get so freaked out that they actually call the police. And the police tell them, whatever you do, don't get out of the car. He can't get into you, just stay in there. We're going to be there soon. But this guy, he doesn't seem bothered at all, that he can fully see and probably hear that the girls are on the phone to the police. He just stays there, tapping his fingers, giggling at the girls. Eventually, when he can hear the sirens, he just drops whatever he's holding and he runs off. And the police never find him, but they do find a knife. And that's where he was dragging around the outside edge of the camper van. No idea if that's true. It seems very dramatic, but I really enjoyed reading it. It scared me, so I thought I needed to tell it here.
I got a spooky story time from a woman named Amara who told me for a 3-month period in 2022, she was receiving late night phone calls from her own number. And when she started answering, the caller would reveal very intimate personal details about her own life. The first few times the number popped up, it was around 2 a.m, and she didn't answer because she thought it was spam. But one night she was spending the night with her boyfriend Michael at her apartment when the number popped up again, and she was half asleep, but she decided to answer. So she answers, she says, hello. There is a clicking noise, and then this whispering, creepy, robotic voice says, do you value your own self-worth, Amara? And she says, who is this? And the caller hangs up. She wakes up Michael. He tells her it was probably just a prank and just to go back to sleep. She and Michael had been dating about 3 months. It was a long-distance relationship. They had met at the Denver airport. Amara lived in Maryland, and she was in Colorado for a girls' trip, so she was grabbing a drink at the bar while waiting for her flight. And this man sat down next to her. He was getting a drink. They got to talking. He was going out of town for work. He was also waiting for his flight. He was going to a different city, but he told her he was going to be in Maryland in the next month for work. So they exchanged numbers. He tells her he's going to take her out to dinner when he gets to Maryland. They text a little bit here and there, nothing too serious. He's polite, he's funny, and she enjoys texting with him. He shows up in Maryland about a month later. He says, do you still want to grab dinner? She says yes. They go out, they hit it off, they have a great time. While at dinner, he tells her basically that he travels all the time for work, but he's in Maryland pretty frequently. And he also tells her that he has an 8-year-old daughter. She's like, oh, what about your baby mama? He's like, oh, like that was a long time ago. Like everything's cool. I've been single. Dinner ends, they go their separate ways, but they continue texting, and he's back the next month. And the next time he comes, they pretty much spend all of his free time while he's there together. He indicates before he leaves that he wants to take their relationship a step further, and she's down with it. She likes it. And the long distance relationship actually works for her because she is a self-described workaholic. She doesn't have a lot of free time, and dating in her city just wasn't really working out for her. So her relationship with Michael was beneficial because she didn't have to worry about spending all this time that she didn't have with somebody in her city. Also, Michael was like very sweet, like words of affirmation guy. He's always texting her about how beautiful she is, how he can't wait to see her next. And one day he's texting her while she's at work, and he's like, I'm going to plan us a surprise trip the following weekend. She's like, oh my God, that's so exciting. Where are we going? He's like, I'm not telling you. It's going to be really nice, really relaxing. Bring some nice clothes. We're going to get massages. It'll just be a really, really nice weekend. So she's all excited. He tells her he's going to fly into Maryland a day early so he can spend the night with her before they go on this trip. 3 nights before he arrives, she gets the first phone call from her own number. She's confused when she looks at it, but she figures it was just like a spam caller spoofing her own number, so she ignores it. They call again the next night. The next night he flies in, they go to dinner, they have a really nice night, and they're sleeping at her apartment when she gets the phone call that she answered when the caller asks if she values her own self-worth. So when that happens, Michael tells her it's just a prank, and she's a little bit creeped out, but she's like, you know what, he's probably right. Like, I'm not going to give that much thought to it. She goes to sleep. She's all excited for their trip the next day. They fly out. They go to this really nice spot. She didn't say where they went, but she said it was a very cute, small mountain town. On the trip, Michael is talking about how much he likes her, how beautiful she is, how much he values her work ethic, and he says that he can see long-term potential and that maybe eventually he could consider moving to Maryland because his company has an office there. And Amara's just stoked. She was not looking for a relationship, but this is just like a pleasant surprise, and she is really feeling him. He flies back to Maryland with her. They spend one more night, and she's really sad when he has to go home the next day. The next day, Amara goes to work, and while she's at work, she receives a flower delivery, and the bouquet is primarily lilies. And Amara has a severe flower allergy, and lilies are one of the flowers that upsets her. So she doesn't want to seem unappreciative, but she calls Michael later that day, and she's like, hey, that bouquet was so nice, but just so you know, I'm really allergic to lilies. And he's like, okay, that's good to know, but I didn't send you flowers. And then she said she felt stupid because she was just assuming that he sent her flowers when he didn't. So she was like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, I guess there wasn't a card on there. Like, whatever. I just assumed that you did. And he was like, no, honestly, like, I should have sent you flowers after that nice weekend we had. So she just assumes the flowers were sent by like a client or something. She doesn't give it that much thought. Michael wasn't supposed to be back in Maryland for about 2 more months. And she was really bummed about it. She would text him. She'd be like, hey, like, if you have a spare weekend or something, you know, maybe you could fly down or I could fly there. And he was just like, oh, like, these are all bad weekends. Like, I have my daughter, this and that. So she was trying to deal with it because she signed up for a long distance relationship, you know, but she was just so excited after that spa trip that it was a little bit disappointing. And during the 2 months that led up to Michael coming back to town, she would get more frequent late night phone calls around 2 in the morning from her own number. And she wasn't really connecting the dots because Michael was there the first night that she answered, so she knew it wasn't him. But she really did just think it was a prank because the messages at first were ominous. They were just like, do you think you're a good person? Do you value yourself? Do you think you're beautiful? But then she really started to get creeped out when they became more detailed and more personal. In one instance, she answered the phone and there was a clicking, and then the robotic voice said, I saw the blue blouse you were wearing at work yesterday. Why did you stay late? So at that point, she knew that the caller was watching her. So that one really scared her. So she calls Michael in the morning, she tells him, and he's like, I really think it's just one of your coworkers or somebody like playing a joke on you. She's like, okay, well, I would really appreciate it if you could help me get to the bottom of this. And he's like, you know what? I have my daughter today. I just really don't have the extra time to be dealing with your perceived problems. So she's like mad at him. She's like, that was rude. And like, she hangs up the phone on him. Before bed, she thinks about it and she's like, you know what? I am being kind of selfish. Like, he doesn't get a lot of time with his daughter. So when he does, I don't want to like interrupt it. And she decides that she's going to call him in the morning and apologize. So that night she goes to sleep, but then she gets another phone call. And this time when she answers, the caller asks if she thinks Michael's daughter knows about her. So when she hangs up the call, she calls Michael immediately. She's like, this is too weird. I need to get to the bottom of this right now. She calls him. His phone goes straight to voicemail. She tries him again at like 6, 7, 8 in the morning, and finally he answers. She's like, what's up? She tells him what the caller said, and he blows up on her. He's like, why are you bringing my daughter into this? Like, this is weird. I don't like this. I don't think I can do this with you. She's like, I'm not bringing your daughter into it. Like, whoever is watching me is. And he tells her, you know what? I don't know if I want to see you this weekend when I'm there. I gotta go. So they don't talk for 3 days until that weekend when he's supposed to be back in town after 2 months of not seeing him. The whole thing did not sit right with her, so she's texting him. He's ignoring all her texts until that Saturday night when he texts her, hey, I'm sorry for how I acted. Would you want to meet up with me? She's like, yeah, come over. She said that she at least wanted closure if they were gonna break up. So he comes over. They get to talking. He tells her he's sorry and that he's just had some stress trying to balance like work and his relationship with his daughter and his relationship with her. They hook up, they go to sleep at her house. She gets a call that night at 2 in the morning and the caller says, look at the man sleeping next to you. He's not who he seemed. The caller hangs up. Immediate alarm bells. She's freaking out. She hits him. She wakes him up. She's like, get up. She tells him what the caller said and Michael sits up in bed. He's like, all right, I had to come clean about something. My ex is psychotic. She's crazy. She is probably stalking you. She's like, I thought you and your baby mama were cool. He's like, not really. Like, we split up like 2 years ago and she's just been like kind of stalking my life ever since. She probably figured out about you and now she's just like tormenting me through you. He's like, I'll get it figured out. Don't worry about it. Just go back to sleep. But Amara is mad that he lied to her, so they spend the rest of the night fighting. He ends up leaving her apartment at like 4 in the morning and going to a hotel. Amara decides after that night she is done with him. She can't trust him. She doesn't want anything to do with him. So she blocks his number and she's done with it. A few days later, she gets a package in her apartment complex mailroom and she goes to grab it. She doesn't know who it's from. She didn't order anything and it's addressed to her. So she takes it upstairs. She opens it up and it's a bunch of photographs of her in various places around her city, some with Michael. Underneath all of the photographs is a copy of his marriage license with a note that says, you were just another layover. Congratulations, you can have him. I'm taking him for all he's worth in this divorce. So all of the late night phone calls were his wife. She had hired a private investigator to track them. So Amara said that she never actually got in contact with the wife. She never talked to Michael again, but she assumes that there were others. She also doesn't know if the wife is the one that sent her lilies because she doesn't know how the wife would know about her lily allergy, except for a post she made on Instagram back in like 2017. Amara ended her email by saying, ladies, be careful, know who you're talking to, do your homework, and Google someone before you just take their word for everything. Amara said she didn't want to be tagged, but that is her real name. She said I could use it, and Michael was his real name as well. She said she didn't want to be tagged because she didn't want people to drag her in the comments for seeing a married man, even though she didn't know. Keep sending me your spooky, scary stories. I'll keep adding them to this playlist.
This may be the scariest story ever that I've ever heard. A guy writes his experience and he says that his wife started peeking at him. At first, it was pranks. So he'd be like in the kitchen cooking his dinner and he'd notice or he'd feel like someone was watching him and he'd turn around and his wife was just... He said that it always used to make him jump, make him scared. She was hiding behind walls, under tables, and she'd never like say anything. When she was caught, she'd just run away. She started doing it in really obscure places, like she'd get in an ottoman and just have her eyes poking out. It really started to freak him out and scare him, so he used to shout at her. And then he said that it kind of stopped for a bit. And while they were having dinner one night, he said, oh, you're not peeking at me anymore. And she said, maybe I'm just getting better at it and you're not noticing me. So then it starts getting creepy again and he's noticing her a bit more. It's scaring him even more that she's not reacting to it. She's not laughing. She's not going, hey, I got you. She just runs away, walks away, and never acknowledges it. And there's one time where he's in the bathroom and he's hearing like this weird sound. And he gets in the shower, he's locked the bathroom door, and when he turns after being in the shower for God knows how many minutes, she's peeking around the curtain at him, and her hair and her face is soaking wet, and it really scares him. So he shouts at her saying like, this needs to stop. And she goes, and he gets out the shower and he locks the bathroom door because he's too scared to be around his wife. And he says he's in this room for 45, 50 minutes. And he starts hearing this like really like heavy breathing, but like excited breathing. And he thinks that she's next to the door, but he's too scared to look underneath the door in case she's under there staring. And then he says that he's working up the courage to unlock the door when he notices the cupboard in the bathroom door is slightly ajar, and she's just been in that cupboard. I feel sick saying this. She's just standing in this cupboard, just staring at him for 45, 50 minutes. And she looks excited that he's caught her out. So he unlocks the door, he runs to the bedroom, grabs the bag and gets in his car and drives away because he's like, I don't want to live like this. It's gone further than a prank. She's scaring me. He goes to his brother's house and he tries to explain like what's going on. And his brother's like, yeah, okay then. And his brother's wife's like, I think she's just playing a prank. And he's like, no, it's gone beyond a prank. It's terrifying. It's like she's haunting me. She's a creep. And then his wife starts texting him saying like, where have you gone? Why are you doing this? But never apologising, never saying sorry. And he just replies like, you know what you're doing until you admit to what you're doing and it stops. I'm not coming home. He decides to stay the night at his brother's house. And when they're all getting ready for bed, they're in the lounge. She's there at the window and there's like saliva marks on the window and she's just staring at them and they all get creeped out, they all scream, and then she's gone. And he's like, look, I'm telling you, there's something wrong with her. So he calls her mum and he says, look, what's going on? And this mum just declines even talking about it. She's like, I don't have time for this, bye. She obviously knows something's going on. He stays at his brother's house for a while. I don't know how long, but he says he's there for a while. And he finally needs to get more clothes and he works up the courage to go to the house. So when they get to the house, they open the doors and it's all dark. She's shut all the curtains. It's in the middle of the daytime, but it's dark. So the brother goes around and he's opening some curtains and they can see that the place is just trashed. And all of the like family photos have just been shattered. She's just trashed the place. And he goes upstairs to the bedroom to get his clothes. And as he's going up the stairs, he can smell rot and decay. I'd turn around. I'm not dealing with that. I'd call the police. No. Go into the bedroom and that's where like a load of the mess is. There's photos strewn over the place, broken picture frames, just shit everywhere. And he's getting his clothes. And as he lifts up a pile of his clothes, he notices an eyeball. But he says it's a small eyeball, like an animal's. And in the cupboard, there's just eyes of different shapes and sizes that are clearly just from murdered animals. And he shouts and freaks out. And his brother's like, what's going on? He's like, something isn't right here. And that's when he starts hearing like that excited, raspy breathing. And he looks under the bed and she's there just staring at him, excited that she's being caught. And he says that he was just petrified. He just stood there and he said to his brother, like, go and get help, go and get help. And his brother's like coming to the bedroom. He's like, don't come in here, go and get help. Her hands are covered in blood because she's like holding this glass and it's just been cut in her hands. And it gets down to a level and he's like, look, babe, you need help. I want to help you. After all, it's his wife, a creepy motherfucker, but it's his wife. And she reaches her hand out to him and he goes to grab it and then she stabs him with a bit of glass. And then he's like, what the fuck, bitch? And then he's just like, what? And he says that at that moment he knew that that wasn't his wife anymore, and they just ran down those stairs. He said that he felt like she was running after them, but they didn't want to turn around, and they got in the car and they drove away. He was too scared to go to the brother's house, and so was the brother, because she'd already been to this house. And he says he ended it, and we haven't had an update from him yet, but he ended it saying that he got himself in a hotel room, and he says that he keeps on feeling like someone's washing him. Imagine being haunted by your wife buy something living. That's disgusting.
This story is from a nurse in Ecuador. She had finished school and they had sent her to a clinic to work overnight so that she can get her hours. So when she works overnight, it's just her, a nurse, and the doctor, and like a security guard that stays in the front just in case anything happens. She usually works the hour from 7 p.m. to 7 in the morning. And the night shift usually is very quiet. Nothing really happens until this one day where a family of mom, dad, and 2 daughters come in because the little girl had a bite on her arm. So the 2 little girls, the one with the bite mark looked like she was around 8, and the other one looked like she was around 4 years old. And the parents tell the nurse that she had gotten bit and they weren't sure by what because they thought it was maybe by the 4-year-old, and they had been taking care of her bite mark, but it looks like it's getting infected and they needed to see her. So she's trying to get all the information, the name, like everything. She had already seen a lot of bite marks, and that bite mark didn't look like it came from like an insect or like an animal. She just wanted to get more information from the family, but as she's trying to get the information, the other nurse that was there with her taps her on the shoulder and tells her to come outside of the room. So when she comes out of the room and she asks the nurse like, what's up, why are you bringing me out here? The nurse tells her that's a duende mark and the duende is gonna take that little girl. And she looks at her like, are you crazy? Like, what are you talking about? What duende? Like, she's looking around like, is it here with us? And the other nurse tells her, I saw that braid on the little girl, and those are the braids that the duendes put on the little girls and mark them, and they're gonna take that little girl. The nurse was like, and I'm sure that bite mark was probably from a duende. So she's taking in everything that the nurse is telling her, and she's like, well, at the end of the day, we still need to treat the bite mark because it could be infected. And the other nurse is like, no, you need to tell them to go home. Like, they need to leave. That's how scared that nurse was that it was a duende mark and that the duende is going to take that little girl. She was terrified. But the other nurse that's telling us the story is like, no, like, she needs to stay here until the doctor can see her. At the end of the day, like, that bite mark can get infected, the little girl can die, so we need her to see the doctor for that bite. And that's exactly what she did. She ended up putting the family in the room. However, the doctor was not there at that point. So she did explain to them that they were going to have to stay until the doctor came so that they can monitor the little girl. She starts talking to the parents because she wanted them to give her more information as to how this was caused or if the little girl had been acting different. And the mom was like, actually, yes, she recently started talking about a friend coming to visit her, and I thought maybe this is just an imaginary friend, like maybe she was having behavior issues or just an active imagination. She says that her daughter kept saying that she had a little friend that would come and visit her at night, but again, she just thought it was an imaginary friend because, you know, kids. So the nurse then decided to talk to the little girl and say, hey, can you tell me what happened to your arm? Are you okay? And the little girl says, oh, my friend did this to me. He got mad at me and bit me. And the nurse is like, what friend? And the little girl says, he goes every night to the house, but my mom doesn't believe me. I see him every night, but when I don't listen to him, he gets really mad at me. She said that night she didn't want him to touch her hair, so when she moved her hair away from him, the friend bit her arm. So the nurse, getting more and more curious, she's like, oh, and what does your friend look like? And the little girl was like, well, he's really small, but he doesn't have faces like us. He looks like my old neighbor. She was trying to tell him that the little thing didn't look like them. He looked like he was old from the face, and her best explanation of that was like, he looks like our old neighbor next door. The nurse also thought to herself, what if she's just like covering up for her sister? Maybe her sister did bite her, but she doesn't want to tell her parents that it was her. So again, the nurse tells the family that they're gonna have to stay here because the doctor's not in yet, but they had given her medication and they just wanted to monitor her in case she doesn't get a fever or anything like that. However, the dad, he explains how he couldn't stay overnight because he had to work the next day. So he ends up going home and the mom stayed there with her 2 girls. So when the dad was leaving, the nurse started talking to the little 4-year-old girl, and she was, you know, telling her, hey, what happened? Maybe like the 4-year-old was gonna say, yeah, I bit her. But the little 4-year-old girl was like, no, my sister has a friend and he doesn't like me. The little girl went as far as to say that her sister's little friend growls at her, but I'm also scared that he's gonna come over here looking for her. And of course the nurse was like, no, he's not gonna come here. You guys are safe here. Whoever the friend is, he will not be coming here. She said that after that, they ended up getting like another bed for the mom and the little girl. So because they also had to wait for the doctor to come in, she tells the other nurse, hey, you should go take a nap while we have time because it's calm now. We're just waiting around for the doctor to get here. So the other nurse agreed that she was gonna go take a nap in the other room. So time passes and it's very like quiet when out of nowhere the nurse that had been taking a nap comes to her and says, hey, I think someone just broke in here. There's someone here. And she was like, well, where's the security guard? Because he's usually at the front. She's like, I went to go look for him first and he's not in the front. So her concern is the family. So she goes to where the family is, and she says that the room doesn't even have a door. It just has a curtain. So she says that they're in there. They can hear that the mom's asleep. They're all asleep. And when she opens up the curtain, they look at the little girl, and she has 2 additional bite marks on her arm. She says that the little girl was still asleep because they had given her like medication, and she was like in between awake and asleep. So they looked at each other like, what the fuck? How does she have 2 additional bite marks? So the mom hears them and she wakes up, and they're like, hey, like what happened? She has additional bite marks. And the mom looks at the daughter and she's like, I don't know what happened. So the 4-year-old also wakes up, just listening to them, sees the additional bite marks, and she starts screaming, I told you he was gonna come and find her. I told you guys. And the mom was like, no, like don't say that. What are you talking about? You need to calm down. So because the mom was so like, what the fuck do you mean the friend was coming? So the nurses managed to calm everybody down, but the lady admits that they were terrified. I mean, they had to be the ones to like calm the situation. They were in charge, but they could not make sense of any of it. And also they couldn't even go back to sleep. So they stayed up until that doctor came. So the doctor comes in, and this doctor had been working there for years, and this clinic was like in the middle of a very, very small town. So he sees basically everybody there. And the doctor confirmed. He said that the duende was trying to take that little girl. The nurse who had just started working there, like she was kind of shocked. She was surprised. And he's like, once you start working here, you're gonna see things that may not have an explanation, but I've seen that bite mark before on other little girls. And he had to have that hard conversation with the mom, and the mom, she accepted it because what else could it have been? She was laying there next to her daughter when she got additional bite marks, didn't see anybody in the room. She had no other choice but to believe the doctor when he said that the duende had marked her daughter. So the doctor tells the mom that the only solution is to cut that braid out of the girl's hair. Actually, they cut the entire hair off of both of the little girls. He said that he had seen this before, and that is what they did, and it worked. But not just that, they also had to move away from their home because if they went back, the duende was gonna just do it again. So the nurse says that the family actually moved away. She said that the mom and the daughters moved first, and the dad had to stay there because he had to work, but eventually he did end up moving, and the duende never came back for the girls. She explains that after that, the doctor told her that he had already dealt with this before, and it's mostly always little girls that they get infatuated with and they try to take. This story comes from a podcast called Hablemos de lo que no existe. So if you want to listen to it in Spanish, please go check.
So my aunt told me this story like a while back, and I had to sleep with the lights on for a little bit. It starts with a woman who lost her husband, and she did not take it very well. So we're gonna call the lady who lost her husband, her name is gonna be Miriam. We're gonna name the husband Ibrahim because my aunt didn't give me any names. You know, she just said the lady, whatever. So I'm gonna give names. So Miriam and Ibrahim, they were always like in love. They were just a perfect couple. Like everybody kind of wanted to be like them. Like everybody looked at their relationship as goals. So Ibrahim and Miriam, they're like growing old together, and one day Ibrahim goes out and he meets somebody named Fatima. She was like a younger girl, body tea. He was like interested, you know. So now Ibrahim is just looking for excuses to go out the house just to see the girl, and eventually he asks the girl to be his wife. So eventually Ibrahim lets Miriam know who is his original wife. He tells her, I'm going to be marrying Fatima. You know, he's going to have another wife basically. Miriam didn't mind that, you know, he was getting married because she was getting older, and it's not uncommon for men to have 2 wives. So a few weeks goes by after the wedding, and Miriam notices a change in her husband. He's barely talking to her. He doesn't even want to eat her food, barely wants to look at her. They just don't have that same relationship anymore, and all of his energy is just invested into Fatima, which is his new wife. So Miriam got so tired of this that she ended up going to see a lady that does black magic. She tells the black magic lady that she wants to break the bond between her husband and Fatima. The black magic lady is telling her, are you sure you want to do this? Because it comes with a price. And she's like, yes, this is what I want to do. The black magic lady told her that the price that it comes with is that if the spell does not follow through how it's supposed to, then it will basically end Miriam. So a few days goes by and Ibrahim's other wife, Fatima, starts going through some things. She's waking up with scratches on her back. Her skin is looking pale. She's having like horrible nightmares. So days are going by and Fatima is just getting worse. And the worse that she's getting, the more in love Ibrahim is to her. Like, he's just there for her. He wants to help her. He's like protecting her. So of course this is making Miriam mad. So the more jealous and angry Miriam is, the worse the attacks on Fatima are. And now Fatima's back is just getting severe. Now she's screaming while she's sleeping. Now everyone thinks she's like going crazy, but she keeps saying someone is like after her, someone's following her. And on this specific night, Fatima and Ibrahim are sleeping. And in the middle of the night, Fatima wakes up like she usually is doing now because, you know, she's going crazy. She wakes up and she's just not herself. Ibrahim is talking to her. She's speaking in a whole completely different voice. Like, she sounds like something's inside of her. So while Ibrahim is trying to calm Fatima down, he sees a dark shadow like in a corner, and it's basically a shadow of his wife Miriam, but it's not her. So he hurries up and runs to where Miriam's room is, and he sees her there just sleeping, which he's confused about. So now he's like, okay, I see that you're the one doing this black magic on my wife. So as soon as Miriam wakes up, he literally kicks her out the house. He says, I don't want nothing to do with you. Go back home to your family. So she left. So a lot of time goes by and Ibrahim is just trying to help his wife Fatima get better, but she's just getting worse. He tried to go to the doctors. They couldn't help her. So he ended up going to a spiritual healer. So the healer tells Ibrahim that Fatima is being visited by someone who has passed on but still hasn't left. So Ibrahim then travels to go confront Miriam. So it took Ibrahim a while to get to where Miriam was at because they lived far from each other at this point. And when he finally arrived, he found out that she had just passed a few days ago. And that night when he went back home, he couldn't go to sleep because, you know, he lost his ex-wife. And he woke up again to Fatima screaming. And this time he sees a clear figure of Miriam just staring at him. So a couple days goes by, but every day that he tries to go to sleep, he's seeing Miriam every night. So of course this is stressing him out, so he goes back to the healer again. The healer tells him that Miriam did not go away peacefully and she has a lot of resentment, and this is basically why Ibrahim and his wife Fatima are suffering. They ended up performing a cleansing which stopped him from seeing the figures. As the years goes by, Fatima is no longer talking. She's not communicating with people. She's just mentally not the same person. So Ibrahim ends up becoming depressed because, you know, his wife is mentally unstable now. And that's the rest of the story. So men, don't get two wives. Stick to one wife.